All right, I want to try to give a quick update on the car. It's been a couple months since I've done anything to it. I've been kind of tied up with some other stuff. Last time I worked on it, I was welding the frame rails on the front of it, doing the floor supports and the cross member underneath the bottom. So I've got all that locked in. I haven't done the torque boxes yet. I'll be getting to that once I get the front end a little more assembled than it is. So currently what I'm working on is the shock towers and trying to align those to where they need to be so that my control arms are symmetrical, directly across from each other at the right angles and all that fun jazz. And so I've got the export brace bolted on there. I bolted it, pretty tight to the firewall, but I have not bolted these down on the top of the shock towers. And the shock towers are just kind of, there's a vice grip on each one, and it's just kind of holding it in place. So I've got some observations from this process that, probably good to share. So these shock towers are Dynacorn shock towers. I got them from Kentucky Mustang. I've got the export brace, came from MPD. It was supposed to be one of their heavier duty ones that, is made out of thicker material and blah, blah, blah. So first observation is that I've heard a lot on different forums about people saying that when you have an older car and your shock towers start to lean inward, they use the export brace to realign that. They push it out with a porter press or whatever, and then they'll put the export brace on there, and then probably a Monte Carlo bar just to hold everything in place. And that's kind of what I was trying to do to align the shock towers in the right place to begin with. But what I've found is the export brace, they're not exactly built all that great. I think this one is actually twisted, which is a concern to me, because when I lay this one on top of this side, I've got a pretty healthy gap under it, whereas I don't have the same gap on the other side. So it seems like this angle here is flanged up a slight bit further than the passenger side. So I'm not sure if that's the case yet, but it sure seems like it. The other thing is along the back, right above at the front of the firewall up on the top of this flange, this bend, this little stamping thing they did here is just, it sucks. There's no other way around it. The fact they got a big bulge in the middle, they got bulges in between each of the bolts, and then this bulge is so big that it holds the nut from tightening down on both sides. That's pretty concerning, because that means those two nuts are never going to be torqued right. If you do crank them down, this thing's, I think, 90 thousandths or 100 thousandths thick, whereas you got three pieces of thin sheet metal here. You go to crank that down, all you're going to do is bend this guy up to conform to that, more than likely. So it's not exactly great. And if you go underneath it, see if you can see it real well or not. But if you look underneath, you've got, of course, there you go. There's your air gap right there in between those two nuts, right? That little line going horizontally. So you're never going to get a really good, bite there. So I am going to be probably building some brackets to go across there. But I'm also going to look online, see if I can find a export brace that is made a little better than this, just to see if they have one that's actually smooth on that same contour, because there is a little bit of an arch to that. But it's just not that wavy mess that's at the back of the export brace. So anyway, that's one of the things that complicates life a little bit here on this process. But so where some of my other interesting little observations is the shock towers. These Dynacorn shock towers. They're supposed to be decent pieces. The holes a couple things. Okay, so first thing is the flanges that are bent on the inside, that are supposed to mount down and get spotted down to the top of the frame rail. These aren't in the right place in some instances. Like this one's bent too high, because what happens is if I lay this thing down on these, the distance from this hole to the top of the frame rail, now I've already laser leveled the frame on both sides, so this distance from here to here is not the same on both sides. So I have to jack this side up. Like you can see, I got a screwdriver lodged under there right now just to hold it up in the air. Probably about 3/16 it's got to come up just to get this hole equal in height to the other hole. And then same thing. This one here, I get a little better now. I kind of tweak it a little bit, and I think I maybe have a 32nd of an inch underneath that tab there. So it's not, that one I can just hammer down and then weld. It's not a big deal. But that gets me these two, where these are at the same elevation, because they're obviously cantered to the rear. They're the same as the other side. Now, that being said, my issue comes up in that as I'm looking at these, is I took a piece of paper and I traced these holes, all three of these holes, on the paper, and then I moved it to the other side. You know, I don't know if you flipped it because it's, you know, mirror image. This guy over here, this hole is an 1/8 inch too high and a little bit towards the back at the same time. So it's about 1/8 inch up and probably, I don't know, it's maybe 3/32 or something to the rear. So now these holes are about 550, I think, in diameter. So you got a 1/2 inch bolt, gives you 50 thousandths of slop in there. So between the two, maybe you could make it work. But my concern with that is if you take that, this piece here, and like this is the passenger side, if you take this and you mount it to it, if you're trying to line those bolts up, either you're wallowing the holes out because these bottom flanges right here have to mount on the bottom of the frame. So either you're wallowing the holes out or that thing's going to hold at a slight angle. And that's just, you know, that it's not great, because what that means is that if you have any misalignment in that piece right there, then your lower arms aren't going to be in the right place. And they're not going to be equal to each other, you know, side to side. Like you'll have it'll be pitched. One will be forward, one will be back, somewhere in that you know, in that alignment. So that's really bad, you know. And same thing up here. So if you were to trust, like for instance, if I was to trust this export brace and crank this down, it's going to lift my shock tower upward a little bit, which is then going to throw my holes out, and now my upper arm is in the wrong orientation to the other side. So there's just a lot to consider there that is not great. So what I'm planning, I guess at this point, is to try to build a fixture that's going to mount between these two shock towers. Because what I need to do is I have, like, if you look on the ground, I've got the you know, blue line there. I got my center line. I lasered the floor, and I measured off the car and the frame and all the you know, little jig points all over the car. And I have that's that little line next to the right of my seam in the concrete. That's my center line of the car. So what I'm going to do is take that center line. I'm going to throw my laser level, because it shoots beams in every axis. I'll be able to line that guy up, and then I'll shoot a beam going side to side, and that'll get me perpendicular to the center line of the car. And then I can basically take that and align it with where those arms and where the shock towers need to be located. And the reason why that's possible is that I could take the holes that are in the car, the regular, you know, the dimension holes, your idler and your steering box, the stuff they have says it in the manual. I can take those. I've already measured off some of that, and I can't remember what it's offhand, but I dimensioned out what that distance is to the center line of the to this hole here, because the manual shows you from the front hole on each of those, from that hole cross the car to the opposite side. It gives you those diagonal dimensions, and so I was able to basically just, you know, do a little trig and find out what the dimension is fore and aft. So now that will allow me to mark the frame where that belongs, and then just bring the laser to that point and then align the shock tower in that position. And that way my distance, my wheelbase is correct at that point. I don't have to worry about that being off. So anyway, that's probably what I'm planning at this point. I have not done the Shelby drop on it yet. Obviously, I've only got the 3 holes in there. And I think that's my chance to correct whatever is wrong. I'll just build the fixture to where when I attach it, I can then drill those holes and have those holes, you know, equal on both sides, you know, complete mirror images. And then I won't really have to worry about what's there. I can just, you know, use the ones that I put in there. I mean, yes, they're going to be pretty close to where they probably are on the existing shock towers, but I think that's the only way to really make sure that the wheelbase is right and that the suspension is actually in the right place. And obviously the other thing is, you know, you got your strut, or your whether you're doing struts or you know, coilovers or whatever. So you got to make sure that angle is proper as well. So it probably will be directly below those, but I'll be just, you know, bolting it to that as I align everything. That way I can make sure that I don't have, you know, the passenger side creeping forward or back or whatever, since this export brace doesn't seem to be kind of the end all be all of alignment. I do have a Monte Carlo bar as well, and that is one other, I won't say grievance, but slight you know, issue I have is if you put the Monte Carlo bar on the car, you know, I know nothing's bolted in place right now, but if I lay that on there, when you align the holes for the Monte Carlo bar and get them to where you could run the bolts through there, if you come to the top, yes, I have a piece of sheet metal from the apron that's going to go under there, but that sheet metal isn't going to take up a 1/4 inch or 3/16 gap. So I don't really know why. I'm guessing there must be a adapter plate or something you put under there, or something to beef it up, because you're never going to close that gap. And if you push it down further, then your holes don't line up anymore. So if I pinch that down, there's no snowball's chance in Hades I'm getting a bolt through either of those holes. So I'm not really sure what the intention was there with how they bent that. But I don't know. I'll have to figure out what to do with that. I'll probably just shim it more likely, but we'll wait and see. But anyway, that's to come in the future, I guess. But for now, I've got to get the shock towers figured out so I can make sure they're at least located in the right positions. There's really not a lot to go on some of these. I know you have that 20-inch dimension, or I think it's 20 inches from this hole down to the datum plane or whatever when they're doing the car. So I can at least make sure that's right, and then obviously the 4 1/2, and that should get me there. But I just really would feel better if there's something locking both sides together, so I can at least make sure they're not, one hasn't moved a 1/4 inch in front of the other or something like that. And then of course you got to keep in mind when you're doing all this that when it's all said and done, you still have to have the right height. Otherwise, your aprons will be too high, or your fenders won't sit right, or all that fun stuff too. So anyway, that's kind of where it stands right now. I've got to do some more dimensioning and then figure out what this fixture is going to look like. I've got an idea to basically cut some plates that have the same hole pattern with the extra holes for the Shelby drop on it, and then that way I can use it for both purposes, and then hopefully be able to align it with that. We'll see. That's more to come on that, obviously. So anyway, that's just where it is now, and just wanted to give a quick update. Thanks.